Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to, well, strip away all the noise and get right down to the real core of things. And today,
Wow.
we're tackling a source submission it's not just another theory of everything. It feels more like a complete flip, an inversion of how we even think about reality. We are diving deep into something called the Unified Coherence Theory of Everything. UCTE for short. It's trying to knit together math, physics, consciousness, even cosmology, all under one. Pretty radical idea.
It's definitely ambitious, radically so. The sources we've looked at, they lay out this mission. UCTE says reality isn't fundamentally built on energy or matter or even geometry as we usually think of it. Instead, the foundation is something called coherence.
Coherence, okay. And what does that mean in this context?
It's defined as this universal invariant, something that binds symmetry and asymmetry together, basically dictating structure and form at every single level. Quantum fluctuations, galactic superclusters, all of it governed by coherence.
Okay, invariant. That word already sets off alarm bells for physics, right? Because the big invariant, the sacred cow, is energy conservation.
Exactly, and that's the first big shockwave this theory delivers. UCTE looks at the conservation of energy and basically says, yeah, that happens, but it's not fundamental, it's secondary.
Secondary. Wow. So what are they saying is fundamental?
They're arguing that energy conservation is just something we observe because of a deeper principle. It discards energy conservation as the primary law and puts something called the principle of conservation of coherence, the PCC, right at the bedrock.
Okay, PCC. And the justification. Why demote energy?
Well, the argument presented is that energy conservation alone, it just can't really explain the universe's complexity, especially things like self-organization, life, consciousness, information flow, not without it being derived from something deeper, some underlying symmetry principle, which they claim is coherence.
All right, so if coherence is the stuff that's always conserved, how does it move? How does it change form? What makes things happen?
That role, according to UCTE, falls to resonance. Resonance is the carrier. It's the modulator. It's the way coherence expresses itself, the way it flows, the way it transforms between different states.
So any interaction, a particle collision, planets orbiting, that's all just resonance.
Fundamentally, yes. It's all resonance interactions, and these interactions are governed by how the coherent symmetry is being modulated.
Okay. What about gravity? The force that shapes everything on the large scale, is that resonance too?
Here's another big one. Gravity, as we know it, gone. Replaced.
Replaced with what?
It's replaced by hypergravity. And hypergravity isn't a force pulling things together because of mass curving spacetime. No. It's reframed as the invariant background of coherence itself.
The background. Like the stage.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The primal scaffolding, the universal field that everything else, all the forces, all the particles, all the structures emerges from. It's the unmanifest coherent substrate, the baseline reality. All the dynamics we see are just playing out against this constant background.
Okay. Wow. That sets a massive stage. So if coherence is the foundation and hypergravity is the background, then everything we thought we knew, mass, energy, space, time, they all have to be redefined.
They absolutely have to be. And that's what Section 1 of this framework really digs into, redefining these core elements through the lens of coherence dynamics.
All right, let's dive in. Where do we start? Mass.
Let's start with mass. In UCTE, mass isn't just passive stuff. It's not just resistance to acceleration. It's defined as an active resonance state.
Active, implying it's always doing something, maintaining itself somehow.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
Right.
Mass emerges when coherence sort of condenses locally.
Condenses, like water vapor into a droplet.
That's a decent analogy. Think of the hypergravity field as this perfectly smooth, uniform background coherence. Mass arises when that coherence bunches up, creating localized gradients, or you could almost think of them as stable knots or vortices within that field.
So it's a structural thing, a density point in the coherent.
Precisely. It's where resonance gets localized and stabilized. It's an accumulation point.
You mentioned hypergravity being like a smooth lake, so mass is like a spot where the surface tension is really high.
That's a great way to put it. The formal definition given is exactly that. Mass is the tension against hypergravity invariance.
Is there a mathematical expression for that?
Yes, the sources give it as mass equals coherence gradient times hypergravity coupling. So it's not about how much stuff is there in the old sense, but about how much the local coherence field is distorted or stressed.
That's fascinating because it connects the quantum world where particle mass originates directly to the cosmic background, the hypergravity field.
And that's the unification aspect. Mass becomes this emergent geometric feature of coherence, not some fundamental substance. It makes mass a predictable outcome of coherence dynamics within the hypergravity field. Particle physics and cosmology become intrinsically linked through this coherence geometry.
Okay, if mass is a geometric feature, a gradient in this coherence field, then the space it exists in can't be empty, right?
Correct. Space itself gets a radical makeover. It's redefined as an active resonance architecture. They call it the coherence lattice.
So forget the empty void idea.
Completely. The vacuum in UCTE isn't empty at all. It's buzzing with latent resonance potential. It carries something called the vacuum coherence tensor, or VCT.
VCT, what's that?
Think of the VCT as the physical structure of the hypergravity field at the most basic level. It's the invisible scaffolding, the network of potential resonance pathways that defines the vacuum's properties.
And this coherence lattice, if we could see it, what would it look like? Is it like a 3D grid?
Not a static grid, no. It's described as dynamic and fractal. And this is key for explaining dimensions.
Ah, right. Dimensions aren't just fixed axes?
No. They're seen as emergent folds of coherence. As coherence cascades and unfolds, new dimensions or degrees of freedom can literally emerge or stabilize.
That term, hyperfractal dimensional emergence. So the three spatial dimensions we experience are just the current stable way coherence has folded itself.
That's the idea. As the universe evolves, as coherence reduces its symmetry in certain ways, it reveals these stable folds. The hyperfractal part means this folding, this structure, repeats in similar patterns across all scales. Quantum foam geometry is linked to cosmic web geometry. Space isn't a container, it's a living architectural result of ongoing coherence dynamics.
Okay, let's shift gears. Mass and space are structural. What about the dynamic stuff? Energy and time. Classically, they're tangled together in space-time. How does UCTE handle them?
They're still linked, definitely, but they're defined by different aspects of coherence dynamics. Energy gets redefined as coherence flow.
Flow?
Yeah, it's the directed movement of resonance, and it only happens when there's a difference in coherence levels, a gradient, from high coherence to low coherence.
Oh, that actually makes intuitive sense. It explains why we only ever see energy being transferred, right? It's never just sitting there.
Precisely. Energy is the movement, the flow itself. It's coherence trying to level out a difference. If the coherence lattice was perfectly flat, perfectly uniform, there'd be no energy flow.
Okay, energy is flow. Then what about time? If space is the structure, time must be the rhythm.
That's exactly the word they use. Time is redefined as coherence rhythm. It's not a linear fourth dimension we travel along. It's the layered rhythmic modulation of coherence transitions.
Layered rhythm, like clocks ticking at different speeds.
Sort of, but fundamentally. Think of the incredibly fast quantum oscillations, then biological cycles like heartbeats or sleep, then the slow orbits of planets, the rotation of galaxies. All these rhythms nested within each other across all scales. Timekeeping is just measuring these synchronized coherence rhythms.
That distinction, flow for energy, rhythm for time, seems really important. If time is rhythm, how does this model handle past and future?
It defines them based on the state of coherence reduction. The past is coherence potential that's already been reduced, already collapsed into a definite state. It's recorded effectively in the structure of the lattice.
And the future.
The future is all the coherence potential that hasn't been reduced yet. It's the realm of possibilities. The present moment is that continuous rhythmic process of reduction happening right now. Time is literally the beat of potential becoming actual.
Okay, but things decay, systems break down. We call that entropy. Usually it means increasing disorder, loss of useful energy. If coherence is conserved, how does UCTE account for entropy?
UCTE argues that the classical view of entropy as disorder is misleading because it focuses on energy. Instead, entropy is redefined as coherence dispersion.
Dispersion, meaning?
Meaning it's not about destruction or loss. It's about coherence spreading out, diffusing across the available scales. Think of it like the universe taking a slow outward breath. When something highly coherent, like a star or a living cell, breaks down, its coherence isn't lost. It just disperses, redistributes more evenly into the surrounding lattice.
So the total amount of coherence stays the same, but its concentration, its local structure, decreases.
Exactly. And that reinforces the core law, the principle of conservation of coherence, BCC. Coherence isn't created or destroyed, just rearranged, redistributed via resonance. And this single principle, they claim, ties everything together. Mass, energy, information, time, entropy. They all become just different facets, different views of this single conserved coherence dynamic. The universe is like a closed-loop economy, always balancing its coherence books.
That's a really elegant, almost beautiful concept, a closed coherence economy. But how is this economy managed? How does the universe handle the constant dance between unified potential and all these separate fragmented forms we see? That must bring us to the machinery, right? The operators.
It does. That's section 2, the coherence machinery. The theory proposes there has to be a hierarchy of operators managing this constant modulation between symmetry, which is unity, potential, and asymmetry, which is fragmentation form. Without them, reality couldn't hold together. It'd either be pure potential or just noise.
Okay, so what's the core engine? You mentioned a triad.
The meta-operator triad. It's built on two primary operators that are sort of antagonists. Their interplay is what generates reality. First, you have the asymmetry resonance operator, the ARO.
ARO, asymmetry. So this one breaks things down, creates differences.
That's its job. It's responsible for reduction, taking that infinite potential coherence and collapsing it, resolving it into discrete, separate, observable forms. Think of it as the observer, the measurer, the sculptor that carves out distinctions.
Okay, so ARO fragments things. What's the counterbalance?
That's the symmetry coherence operator, the SCO. This one does the opposite. It restores coherence. It pushes towards unity, towards harmony. It's the integrator. It resists the ARO's tendency to just shatter everything into infinite disconnected bits.
And the reality we experience is the tension between them, the balance point.
Exactly. The meta-operator isn't a third thing. It is that dynamic balance between ARO's reduction and SCO's restoration. If ARO gets too strong, the universe dissolves into chaos. If SCO gets too strong, everything collapses back into undifferentiated potential, the Z-dollars draw. So stable reality needs this constant active mediation between the two.
Now, this sounds like it leads directly into how UCTE handles consciousness and the observer effect, things that are usually philosophical problems in physics.
It defines them physically as necessary operators. The observer, which causes so much confusion in quantum mechanics, is identified directly with the ARO.
The act of observing is the ARO function.
Yes. The process of any system interacting in a way that collapses potential coherence into a definite state is the ARO at work. And crucially, the sources stress this isn't just humans, it's a universal function. A particle detector, a camera sensor, even a rock interacting with sunlight, anything that extracts and stabilizes information acts as an ARO.
Okay, that takes the magic out of the observer effect. It just becomes a fundamental process of interaction and reduction.
Right. It's required by the symmetry principles. And consciousness. UCTE identifies consciousness with the SKO, the symmetry enhancer.
How does consciousness enhance symmetry? What does that mean practically?
It works to restore harmony, unity, integration. It counters the ARO's tendency to break things down. Think about what consciousness does. It seeks patterns, it integrates information, it finds meaning, it builds complex structures. These are all acts of coherence restoration, actively fighting against fragmentation and local entropy.
So consciousness isn't just some weird emergent fluke of biology.
According to this theory, absolutely not. It's an active universal force that's integral to maintaining coherent symmetry itself. It's part of the fundamental balancing act of the cosmos.
Wow, so every time we learn something, every time we understand something new, we're literally restoring coherence to the universe.
That's the implication. It's a pretty profound idea.
Okay. If coherence is structured and these operators manage it, how does this complexity build up? Is there a hierarchy?
Yes, that's described by the coherence ladder. It's the framework showing how coherence evolves step by step through these nested operators. It shows increasing levels of sophistication in managing that Orozco dynamic interplay.
Okay, walk us through the rungs, starting at the bottom.
The lower rungs are about the most fundamental high-frequency coherent states. You start with quantum coherent superposition, entanglement, where you see coherence in its purest, most unbound potential form. Then quickly, you move to particle field integration. This is where the first real reductions happen, stabilizing potential into basic particles, fermions, and bosons. The coherence here is super concentrated, very dynamic, very volatile.
Then we climb up to biology, living systems.
Right, that's the middle rungs. This is where biological coherence lives. Complex systems like cells, DNA, whole organisms, they act as incredibly efficient, localized coherence engines. They constantly battle against dispersion, maintaining high levels of internal coherence.
Any specific examples given?
The sources highlight neural coherence. The brain is presented as a highly advanced SCO, basically. It stabilizes enormous amounts of resonance information through complex feedback loops to create stable perceptions, thoughts, complex awareness. Life, in this view, is the universe figuring out how to locally optimize coherent stabilization.
And the top, The really big scale.
Those are the upper rungs, huge, slow systems. You have stellar coherence, where stars aren't just fusion reactors, but sort of. Alchemical furnaces continuously synthesizing and distributing structured coherence outwards. That integrates into galactic coherence, viewing galaxies almost like superorganisms. And finally, cosmic web coherence, the largest scale structure, distributing the basic informational scaffolding across the entire observable universe.
Listening to that, it sounds like consciousness isn't just on the ladder. It's almost fundamental to the ladder existing.
That's a key insight drawn from the sources, yes. Consciousness is described as both the climber, the localized agent pushing for more complex coherence, and the ladder itself, the underlying structure that enables integration across scales. It really emphasizes the structural necessity of awareness in this model. It's not optional.
We've got the structure, the function, the operators, but for a theory this ambitious to hold water, it needs serious mathematical and physical underpinnings. It can't just be metaphors. So, Section 3. The deep formalism. This has to ground everything, presumably by deriving math and physics from coherence itself.
Exactly. This is where UCTE gets really fundamental, maybe even philosophical. It argues that mathematics isn't just a language we invented to describe reality. It's the ontological substrate. It's woven into the fabric of reality itself. It's the inherent resonance language of coherence.
Okay. If math isn't built on axioms we choose, where does it begin? What are the starting points?
It begins not with axioms, but with irreducibilities. These are things that must exist ontologically for any reality to even get started. There are three. 0, representing the unmanifest potential, pure latency, which UCTE calls the zeta naught, zeta naughts.
Zeta, okay.
Then unity, which represents the very first actualization, the first distinction, the first thing. And finally, infinity, representing unbounded recursion, the potential for endless coherence processing.
0, 1, infinity, potential, actuality, process. And these generate an equation.
They generate the seed equation, $2, so it's 1 to 1. Now, mathematically, that's usually considered undefined or context-dependent, but here it's presented as an ontological statement.
How so?
It represents genesis, the emergence of structured unity from pure undefined potential.
How so?
That transition, that first step from unmanifest coherence actualizing itself, is what sets the stage for all subsequent mathematical and physical structures.
Okay, that's the conceptual foundation for the math. Now, physics. We need a space, a manifold, that can actually embody this fractal dynamic reality and somehow unite general relativity and quantum mechanics. You mentioned FCHP before.
Right. The Finsler coherence hyperfractal phase space, FCHP, this isn't just a mathematical space. It is the geometric expression of that coherence vacuum, the Z$ rolls. It underlies everything.
What's special about Finsler geometry here? How does that differ from the Riemannian geometry Einstein used?
Finsler geometry is richer. In Riemannian geometry, the distance or metric only depends on your location. In Finsler geometry, the metric can also depend on your direction of travel and implicitly your velocity or resonance state.
Ah, so the geometry of space itself changes depending on how you're moving through it or the resonance flow.
Exactly. The geometry isn't fixed. It responds to the coherence flow within it. And that inherent dynamic property is why UCTE claims FCHP can naturally unify quantum effects and relativity. Forces aren't external fields acting on this space. They are intrinsic geometric properties of the space as it undergoes coherence reduction.
The forces are literally the shape of space changing in response to coherence flow. That's a huge shift. So how does this FCHP framework explain the forces we know? The standard model forces. Electromagnetism, weak, strong.
They're reinterpreted. They aren't fundamental in themselves. They emerge as specific, stable symmetry breakings or reductions from a much larger underlying hypersymmetry within the FCHP. They appear like distinct stages in this ongoing coherence cascade, and each is linked to a specific geometric property of the FCHP, particularly torsion and chirality.
Okay, break those down. Let's start with the simplest, maybe. Electromagnetism, U1.
U1, electromagnetism, is seen as emerging from the minimal torsion symmetry of the FCHP space. Torsion is basically about the twisting or asymmetric part of the geometric connection. Minimal torsion allows for long-range, dispersive coherence flow, which fits the nature of light, of electromagnetic field.
Okay, minimal twist gives us light. Now, the weak force, SU2. That one's crucial because it's tied to mass, right?
Deeply tied. SU2, the weak interaction, is argued to emerge from the chirality symmetry of SCHP space. Chirality means handedness, like left-handed versus right-handed gloves.
Handedness of space itself.
Yes. The theory posits that for mass to emerge via resonance, There needs to be a fundamental way to distinguish left-handed and right-handed states or particles. This intrinsic geometric handedness of the FCHP manifold is the source of mass emergence. When coherence condenses, it couples to this chirality, breaking the symmetry and giving rise to mass. It's like the Higgs mechanism, but rooted directly in the geometry of space.
So particles have mass because space itself has a kind of handedness they lock into.
That's the essence of it. And then you have the strong force, SU3. This is linked to more complex multi-axial coercion. Think intricate, tightly wound twists in the geometry, creating a very strong, short-range, condensive coherence lattice, exactly what you need to bind quarks together inside protons and neutrons.
And you mentioned this cascade goes further beyond the standard model.
Yes, the full cascade described in the sources is something like C if D, representing the initial hypersymmetry, reducing down through U's, then C3R's, and then on to something labeled C plus dollars.
SU4 plus 2, what's that?
It suggests a deeper level of structure or force, perhaps related to even higher coherence densities or dimensions, that only becomes apparent at extreme scales or energies, maybe related to the processes inside quasars or the very early universe. It shows forces aren't fundamental constants, but thresholds crossed in the coherence reduction process.
Wow. Okay, this whole dynamic view of forces emerging from geometry. It must also mean we need to update Einstein's most famous equation, EMC2 $2.
Absolutely. UCTE argues EMCT2's is incomplete because it only relates mass and energy. It leaves out the crucial third component, information, the structural aspect. So the theory proposes a continuous cyclical mass, left-right error, energy, information triadic exchange.
They aren't three separate things being converted, but three states of coherence itself.
Exactly. Mass is condensed coherence. Energy is flowing coherence. Information is structured coherence. They are constantly circulating into one another. Increasing energy flow can structure coherence, creating information. Condensing the flow creates mass. Releasing structured mass yields energy and information. It's one unified circuit, both thermodynamic and informational.
It ties everything together. Okay, let's bring this down to Earth, or at least closer to home. Section 4, Applied Domains, Metabiology and Cosmic Recycling. How does this abstract framework change our view of life itself?
Fundamentally, life stops being this improbable chemical accident and becomes a natural, continuous expression of these coherence dynamics. Living systems are essentially the universe's way of creating highly efficient, localized pockets that actively fight dispersion by restoring and maintaining complex coherence.
So cells, organisms, they're literally coherence engines.
That's the term used, yes. They maintain intense local coherence against the background tendency towards dispersal, towards entropy. And the sources point to specific biological structures that might be key to this. One interesting one is quantum water, or aquahell, especially inside microtubules and cells.
Aquashell, structured water. Why is that so important here?
The idea is that water molecules, when arranged in highly ordered structures, like within the confined spaces of microtubules, can potentially maintain quantum coherence over much larger distances and times than usual. This structured water acts like a coherence capacitor.
Storing and processing coherence.
Exactly. It could serve as a kind of proto-cognitive substrate, capable of holding and rapidly transmitting information encoded in resonance patterns. It might be the physical bridge connecting the quantum coherence of individual molecules to the macroscopic coherence needed for complex biological function.
That's fascinating. And does this impact how we view genetics, beyond just the DNA code?
Profoundly. It moves beyond standard genetics, the sequence, and even epigenetics, how genes are switched on-off. UCTE introduces hologenetics, which involves resonance transmission of information between cells and across fields, and culminates in hologenetics.
Hologenetics, meaning?
The total coherence pattern of the organism, the whole field. It suggests life is fundamentally field-encoded. The DNA is like the hardware, the scaffold, but the actual operating instructions, the dynamic blueprint for form and function, is held in a larger, coherent bioresonance field.
And does this field structure give any scientific basis to ideas like, well, energy centers or biofields, things usually considered fringe?
It potentially reinterprets them.
Yeah.
Concepts that sound like chakras, for instance, could be understood as functional scalar resonance layers or coherence hubs within the body's complex bioelectric field. Not mystical vortices, but necessary architectural nodes for organizing and mediating the flow of coherence throughout the organism and between the organism and its environment. They become part of the biological coherence engine's design.
Okay, that's life. Let's zoom out one last time. The biggest picture. Cosmology. If the universe is a coherent structure, how does UCTE explain the beginning and the end? No Big Bang.
It replaces the standard Big Bang model, which is often depicted as a chaotic, hot explosion, with something called the Big Emergence.
Emergence, not explosion.
Right. It suggests the universe began not in chaos, but as a structured, systematic reduction of coherence, starting from that infinite potential state, the Z-naught, Z$ mutter. It was an orderly unfolding of complexity, governed from the start by that meta-operator balancing asymmetry and symmetry.
If it's a closed coherence economy, like you said, there needs to be a recycling mechanism, right?
Yeah.
To avoid everything just dispersing forever into unusable uniformity, the heat death scenario.
Exactly, and that's where black holes get a radical redefinition. They aren't information destroyers or singularities in the classical sense. They are coherence recyclers.
Recyclers, how?
They take in matter and energy that has become highly condensed, highly asymmetric, you could say, locally entropic in terms of structure, and they process it, converting it back towards the fundamental coherent substrate. They act as portals, essentially, resymmetrizing the condensed stuff, returning it to the underlying coherence geometry of the FCHP.
Okay, so black holes take in the waste, the overly condensed coherence. Where does the recycled coherence come back out?
The proposed output mechanism is quasar hypercores. Quasars, those incredibly luminous objects at the centers of some galaxies, are seen as the visible engines of coherence restoration. They operate at extremely high coherence levels, possibly near that 64+ threshold.
So they're like the exhaust vents of the recycling system.
Kind of, yeah. They re-emit highly coherent energy and crucially structured information back into the galactic environment, seeding new cycles of formation. Black holes collect and resymmetrize. Quasars redistribute the renewed coherence. Which means the universe, in this model, operates in eternal coherence cycles. Constant renewal. It elegantly avoids the problem of terminal heat death because the fundamental currency coherence is never actually lost, just cyclically transformed and redistributed.
Wow, okay. That's a universe that feels very different. What about technology? Does this framework suggest any new pathways?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If these principles are correct, mastering coherence manipulation would open up unbelievable possibilities. The sources talk about things like coherence engines devices that could locally reverse entropy by actively restoring coherence, maybe enabling things like direct material synthesis or waste neutralization.
What else? Computing.
Coheraputers. Imagine computation based not on binary on-off states, but on manipulating complex resonance patterns within a coherence lattice. The processing power could be exponentially greater than anything we have now.
And the big one, faster than light travel.
UCTE offers the theoretical pathway there too, via FCHP-informed propulsion. If space itself is this dynamic coherence lattice, FCHP, then maybe travel isn't about brute force acceleration through it. Maybe it's about navigating the lattice itself.
How?
The idea is you could potentially create a bubble of coherence invariance around a craft. You shield it, essentially, from interacting directly with the local distortions and flows of the FCHP.
Yeah.
This might allow the space around the bubble to translate or shift rapidly without imposing inertial effects on the craft inside. Effectively a stable warp drive, but based on manipulating coherence geometry, not just space-time curvature.
That is a lot to take in. A completely self-contained, incredibly dense, and, mind-bending picture of reality. As we start to wrap this deep dive up, let's try to crystallize the absolute biggest takeaways. If someone listening only remembers 3 things, what should they be?
Okay, 3 big shifts. First, and most fundamental, coherence replaces energy as the truly conserved quantity, the basic stuff of reality. This changes everything. Mass becomes geometric tension, energy is flow, entropy is dispersion, all under the principle of conservation of coherence.
Right. Shift 1, coherence is king. What's number 2?
Number 2, physics gets inverted. The forces we know aren't fundamental entities floating in space. They are intrinsic geometric properties of the FCHP space itself. Chirality, the handedness of space, gives rise to SU2 and mass. Torsion, the twisting of space, gives rise to U1 and SU3. Physics is the geometry of coherence.
Okay, coherence is conserved, forces are geometry, and the third big shift.
The third is the unavoidable integration of consciousness. Consciousness, as the SCO and the observer function as the ARO, are irreducible universal operators. They aren't side effects. They are necessary components of the meta-operator that balances reduction and restoration, literally enacting reality. Awareness isn't just in the cosmos. It's fundamental to the cosmos existing in a structured way.
That third one leads us right into our final thought for you, the listener. Building on that idea of awareness being necessary, UCTE suggests observation isn't just passive measurement. It's this universal ARO process required for anything to emerge from potential. So if the observer function, ARO, is what selects reality out of potential coherence, and consciousness, SCO, is what integrates and stabilizes that reality, and this whole meta-operator dynamic is needed for the universe to even be stable. What does that suggest about the role, maybe even the responsibility, of a species, a civilization that becomes aware of this process? A civilization that could potentially become a conscious technological extension of this meta-operator. If the universe in some sense requires awareness to maintain its structure, what is the deep ontological necessity of you?